On the 2nd of August 2019, 23-year-old Warwickshire, UK resident Louise Porton was sentenced to life for the murder of her two daughters, Scarlett and Lexi. Her prosecution was overseen by the Birmingham Crown Court. Porton killed her daughters Lexi, aged 3, and 17-month-old Scarlett in Rugby in 2018. The 23-year-old had researched how long it took for body parts to go cold. Prosecutors said that her motivations were that her daughters got in the way of her sex life. Prosecutors told the jury of the events that had occurred. Lexi had been dead for some time on the 15th of January before her mother called for help. When the call handler asked if the girl was breathing, Porton simply replied, no. Fewer than 3 weeks later, on the 1st of February, her second daughter Scarlett was found, completely lifeless. Porton admitted to sending nude photographs to a photographer and offering sex acts in return for money while Lexi was still in hospital in January. The day after Lexi's death, on the 16th of January, Porton accepted 41 friend requests on the dating app Meet Me and was also messaging men on another app, Badoo. She arranged a date with a man named Leon that same night and was overheard laughing in a funeral parlour days after Lexi died. Porton denied that her online searches, including "Can you actually die if you have a blocked nose and cover your mouth with tape?" and "How long after drowning can someone be resuscitated?" had anything to do with Lexi and Scarlett's deaths. However, medical examiners have all concluded that the cause of death for both Lexi and Scarlett were unnatural suffocation. This means that it is highly unlikely that they accidentally suffocated on something while in their beds or cots, or otherwise was a result of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. Before I continue into other cases in the psychology of mothers who kill, I want to give a moment to show these two photos of Lexi and Scarlett so they are not forgotten. Lexi is the older one with the brown bob, whereas Scarlett is the younger one. I want to send my condolences to family members who were completely shocked and unaware of what was going on, particularly the father who never got to meet his youngest daughter, Scarlett. I believe this case first showed up upon the BBC News Where You Are area because I am local and nearby to where this occurred. It shocked the area, it shocked the country, and it has even gone global, shocking the world. How could a mother take the lives of these two beautiful little girls for seemingly absolutely no reason? There was no reason to do this. Very sadly, I didn't need to read the rest of the article to figure out why she did it, because this is not the first case of a mother killing their children for similar reasons, and I am sad to say it will not be the last. Susan Smith was born on the 26th of September 1971 in South Carolina, US. Smith's father committed suicide when she was 6 years old, and she attempted it herself at age 13. Her mother married Beverly Russell, a member of the local chapter of the Christian Coalition, who later revealed to have molested Smith when she was a teenager. After graduating from high school in 1989, Smith made a second attempt to end her own life after a married man ended the affair that they had. She later went on to marry David Smith, and they had 2 sons, Michael and Daniel, but the relationship was rocky due to mutual allegations of infidelity, and they separated several times. In January 1994, Susan met Tom Findlay, and they began casually dating, but by spring, she and David were back together. The reconciliation only lasted a few months, and Susan told David she wanted a divorce. In September, she was back to dating Tom again and planning their future together. However, on October 17th, 1994, Tom Findlay sent a Dear John letter to Susan. His reasons for wanting to end their relationship included differences in their backgrounds, and he was also emphatic about not wanting children or wanting to raise her children. 8 days after the Dear John letter, on October 25th, 1994, Smith reported to the police that her vehicle had been carjacked by a black man who drove away with her son still inside. For 9 days preceding that, she made dramatic television appearances and pleas, begging for their rescue and return. However, following an intensive investigation and nationwide search, on the 3rd of November 1994, she confessed to letting her car roll into a nearby lake, drowning them inside. The detectives had doubted Smith's story from the start and believed that she murdered her sons. By the second day of the investigation, the police suspected that she knew their location. They began to search in local lakes and rivers after her confession, where the bodies were eventually found. There is so much more to this story, including the molestation of her by Bev, although she later confessed to a sexual relationship with Bev right up until the murders, ending approximately 6 months before. It only took the jury 2.5 hours to return with a verdict of guilty of 2 counts of murder, and despite David's protests, Susan Smith was spared the death sentence, receiving a sentence of 30 years life in prison. She'll be eligible for parole in 2025. David has sworn to attend every parole hearing to try and keep Susan Smith in jail for life. These are the 2 Smith children, the older one being Michael and the younger being Alexander. Michael was 3 at the time of his death and Alexander was 14 months old. Michael and Alex were buried together on November 6, 1994 at their local United Methodist Church cemetery. They are buried next to the grave of David's brother and the children's uncle, Danny Smith. I've tried to find more information about the boys and what they were like so we can remember them fondly, but I can't find much about them, possibly due to their young ages. They hadn't developed stable personalities yet, but alike Lexi and Scarlett, they both look very sweet and happy, and they were very much treasured by their father, who is still seeking to make sure that justice is served for them. Casey Marie Anthony was born on the 19th of March 1986 to George and Cindy Anthony. She later went on to have a daughter called Kaylee on August 9th, 2005. On June 9th, 2008, Casey, her daughter Kaylee, who was almost 3 years old, moved out of her home and in with her ex-boyfriend Ricardo Morales and their friend Amy. She did not return for 31 days. Casey's mother Cindy repeatedly asking during that month to see Kaylee, but Casey claimed she was too busy with a work assignment in Tampa. Other times she said Kaylee was with a nanny who Casey referred to as Zenaida or Zanny, or at the theme park or at a beach. Here is a complete timeline of the events in 2008, from Kaylee's disappearance to the finding of her body. June 9th, 2008, Casey Anthony and her daughter Kaylee move out of Casey's parents' home with her ex-boyfriend Ricardo and their friend Amy. June 15th, Kaylee is videotaped visiting an assisted living facility with her grandmother Cindy, who in turn is visiting her father. Cindy swims with Kaylee in the pool later that day. The ladder to the pool is removed and the gate is closed. June 16th, 2008, Kaylee is last seen alive at the Anthony residence. According to the defense, Kaylee drowned in the family's above-ground swimming pool sometime during the day, and both Casey and George panicked upon finding the body and covered up her death. This is the timeline testified in court from several different sources. June 16th at 7 a.m, Cindy testifies that she left for work a few minutes before 7 while everybody else was asleep. 7:52 a.m, activity from Casey's password-protected account on MySpace is seen, and research for Shot Girls costumes for a Tony Lazzaro nightclub event is searched up. 7:56 a.m, an IAM account was used to chat on the computer. 12:50 p.m, according to George, Kaylee departed with Casey around 12:50 with backpacks on their shoulders. There, however, is a slight discrepancy in this because further computer activity and pings on her cell phone do not leave the area of the home until about 4:11 p.m. At 1:39 p.m, activity associated with Casey's AIM, MySpace, and Facebook accounts on the computer are found. The last browser activity during that session is at 1:42. At 1:44, Casey rings her friend Amy, and this ends around 2:21. Around 2:30 p.m, George says that he left at this time to go to work. At 2:49, Casey's cell phone connects with the tower nearest to the home, and the Anthony family's desktop computer is activated by somebody using a password-protected account. This account belonged to Casey. At 2:51 p.m, a Google search is made for the term foolproof suffocation, and at 2:52, activity on MySpace is logged. At the same time, she receives a phone call from Jesse Grund, and he describes the conversation as abnormal because Casey stated to him that her parents were divorcing and she had to find a new place to live. At 3:04 p.m, Casey disconnected her phone call from Jesse to take an incoming call from George. According to the defense, the 26-second call from her father took place as soon as he got to work to tell her, "I took care of everything," telling her that he disposed of the body and warning her not to tell her mother about the child's death. At 3:34, Casey made a phone call to her boyfriend Tony Lazzaro, but this was unanswered. Between 4:10 and 4:14 p.m, Casey made 6 unanswered phone calls to her mother. At 4:11 p.m, Casey's cell phone rings, indicating that it was at or near the house until she headed toward Lazzaro's apartment at 4:11. At 7:54 p.m, she and Lazzaro are seen entering and walking around a Blockbuster video store, and Kaylee is not with them. June 17th, George and Cindy notice that the gate to the swimming pool is open and that the ladder is next to the pool. June 20th, Casey is captured in various photos partying at a Fusion nightclub and participating in a hot body contest. June 23rd, Lazzaro testified that he helped Casey break into the shed at her parents' home to take gas cans for Casey's car, which had run out of gas. He said that he watched Casey open the trunk, although he did not see the inside. He said that there was no odor he could detect. The following day, on June 24th, George called the police to report the break-in and the missing gas cans. Later this day, he saw Casey at the residence and confronted her about taking them. He then went to get them out of his daughter's car. She ran past him, quickly opened the trunk and retrieved the gas cans herself, yelling, "Here's your fucking gas cans." George testified that he smelled gasoline but no other odors. On June 30th, Casey's car is towed from a parking lot after being there for several days. Her purse and her child's car seat are found in the back. On the 2nd of July, Casey gets a tattoo saying Bella Vita, which means beautiful life in Italian. On July 13th, 2008, George and Cindy found a notice from the post office for a certified letter at their front door. 2 days later, on the 15th of July, George picked up the letter and found out that his daughter's car was in a tow yard. When he went to pick up the car, both he and the tow yard attendant noted a strong smell coming from the trunk. They both later stated they believed the odour to be that of a decomposing body, but when the trunk was opened, it contained a bag of trash and no human remains. The exact same day as the car was picked up, his wife Cindy reported Kaylee missing to the Orange County Sheriff's Office. During the same telephone call, Casey confirmed to the 911 operator that Kaylee had been missing for a total of 31 days. Cindy said, "There's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car." When Detective Yuri Melik of the Orange County Sheriff Department began investigating Kaylee's disappearance, he found several discrepancies in Casey's signed statement. When questioned, Casey said that she had supposedly been kidnapped by Zinada, otherwise known as Zanny, Kaylee's nanny. Although Casey had talked about her, Zanny had never been seen by Casey's family or friends, and in fact there was no nanny. She also told the police she was working at Universal Studios, a lie she had been telling her parents for years. When they brought her to Universal Studios on July 16th, the day after Kaylee was reported missing, they asked her to show them her office. Casey led police around for a while before admitting that she had been fired years before. She was first arrested on that very same day and charged with giving false statements to law enforcement, child neglect, and obstruction of criminal investigation. The judge denied bail, saying Casey had shown woeful disregard for the welfare of her child. On July 22, 2008, the judge set the bail to a total of $500,000. Through August 11th to August 13th, a meter reader Roy Cronk called the police about a suspicious object he found in a forested area near the Anthony residence. The first time he called, he was directed to the tip line, which he did, receiving no return call. The second time he called again to the sheriff's office and eventually met two police officers and reported to them what he had seen and appeared to be a skull near a grey bag. On that occasion, the officer conducted a short search and stated he did not see anything. August 21st, 2008, 1 month after the incarceration, she was released from the county jail after her bond was posted by the nephew of a Californian bail bondsman, Leonard Padilla. On December 11, 2008, Cronk called the police again. They searched and found the remains of a child in a trash bag. They discovered duct tape, which was hanging from Kaylee's hair, and some tissue left on her skull. Over the next 4 days, more bones were found in the wooded area. On December 19th, a medical examiner confirmed that the remains were of Kaylee Anthony. The death was ruled a homicide, and the cause of death was undetermined. We are now about to reach 2009. On April 13th, prosecutors say they will seek the death penalty, which reverses an earlier decision to not pursue capital punishment. It is not until May 24, 2011, in which the prosecution and defense deliver opening statements in an Orlando courtroom. The prosecution states that Casey used duct tape to suffocate Kaylee. However, the defense contends that the child actually drowned in her grandparents' swimming pool and that George Anthony had warned Casey that she would be imprisoned and covered up her death, and therefore she had failed to report the incident for 31 days. The defense also alleged that George Anthony had sexually abused his daughter Casey as a child, and also went on to insinuate that Kaylee had been a product of incest between him and his daughter that he wanted to get rid of. However, the defense also admit that Casey had in fact fabricated the story of the nanny, and that the nanny had never existed at all. George is called up as a first witness, and he denies both ever having sexually abused his daughter or covering up the death of his granddaughter. Throughout the evidence portion of the trial, there were several different key pieces that indicated Casey had something to do with her daughter's death. A forensic expert, Arpad Vass from the FBI, testified that the only plausible explanation for the odour in the car trunk was the presence of a decomposing body. Crime scene evidence included residue of a heart-shaped sticker found on the duct tape over the mouth of Kaylee's skull. However, the laboratory were not able to capture a heart shape photographically after some duct tape was subjected to dye testing. However, a blanket that was found at the crime scene matched bedding from Kaylee's bedroom in her grandparents' house. It was alleged that computer searches found the word chloroform 84 times. However, this was later misread in the forensic data, and that the word chloroform had only been searched 1 time. However, they did in fact confirm that the Google search for foolproof suffocation at 2:51 p.m. on June 16, 2008 was made. According to Cindy and George's testimony, at this time both of them would have already been at work. It's also important to note that in October 2009, officials released 700 pages of documents, including records of Google searches for the terms neck breaking and how to make chloroform. Among photographs that were entered for evidence was a photo of Ricardo Morales depicting a poster with the caption, "Win her over with chloroform." By July 5, 2011, 7 women and 5 men of the jury deliberated for 10 hours and 40 minutes before coming back with their verdict. It had become a national and international case, and people wanted to see Casey jailed for life. To the horrified public, the jury came back with a verdict of not guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter of a child. She was, however, found guilty of 4 misdemeanor counts of providing false information to law enforcement. On July 7, 2011, Anthony is sentenced to 4 years in jail with credit for time served. She's also fined $1,000 for each count. August 11th, 2011, a report is released by the Florida Department of Children and Families concluding that Anthony was in fact responsible. September 15th, 2011, a judge rules that Anthony owes nearly $98,000 for the costs of investigating Kaylee's disappearance. Days later, he orders her to pay an additional $119,822 to the police, bringing the total to more than $217,000. She still, however, has never received a guilty verdict for the death of her daughter, despite the evidence given. George later on went to become addicted to alcohol and dependent on his medication due to the allegations of him sexually abusing his daughter and being involved in the death of his granddaughter. This is Kaylee Marie Anthony. She was almost 3 years old at the time of her death. She was very much beloved by most definitely her grandmother and grandfather, and I wholeheartedly believe, based on the evidence, that George had nothing to do with her death. The fact that her mother was out at clubs and participating in hot body contests while she was supposedly missing is a massive indicator that Casey Marie Anthony has not received justice. I wholeheartedly believe as well that Casey is in fact responsible for the death of her daughter. I am very sorry for the family members who have not received justice. Her parents still support her no matter what, but I believe that they are very much misled and blinded by parental love. It's a very sad case because nobody at the end of the day was even given life in prison or a murder sentence for the loss of this beautiful little girl. So why did this happen? Why did these mothers decide to commit filicide? I've already talked about Mary Beth Tinning. She killed 8 of her children, but she did it for very different reasons. Her problem lay in Munchausen by proxy, the need to either fake an illness or induce an illness upon another person, and it is most usually mothers to their children. Mary Beth Tinning's motivations were of emotional satisfaction. The attention that she got from her children's deaths brought her comfort in a way. It brought her acknowledgement. That's why she did it. But this was not the reason that these women in this video did what they did. In fact, if anything, they were trying to get rid of the unwanted attention. I will be linking all of the case information as well as this research in my description, but this is a study done on maternal filicide. In 1979, de Orban wrote a paper on why women kill their children. During a 6-year period from 1970 to 1975, they researched the cases of 89 women who were charged with the killing or the attempted killing of their children in a female reprimand prison. 6 types of maternal filicide were distinguished. The first is battering mothers, 36 cases, mentally ill mothers, 24 cases, neonaticides, 11 cases, retaliating mothers, 9 cases, women who killed unwanted children, 8 cases, and mercy killing, 1 case. I'm unsure what is meant by battering mothers because there is battered woman syndrome or women who batter their children, so I don't want to pay the amount of money to find out what they mean, but I believe using the psychological knowledge I have and the context of this, I think it might be mothers who were battering their children and accidentally killed them. A mercy killing is only one of the 89 cases, possibly meaning that the child was either physically or mentally ill, and therefore they believe that it was merciful. This is the least likely type of killing in this case in particular. Retaliating mothers and those who kill unwanted children, although making up only 9 and 8 of these cases, tend to be one of the most common reasons for killing a child. All 3 of these cases in this video refer to unwanted children. Louise Porton didn't want her children to get in the way of her sex life. Susan Smith didn't want her children to get in the way of her relationship. And Casey Lee Anthony didn't want her child to get in the way of her partying, as evidenced by the fact that she instantly went out to clubs when her daughter was supposedly missing. Although I would need full access to the article in order to properly examine what is given, I do have a problem with a couple of these. Mentally ill mothers' 24 cases could overlap in many different categories. People who retaliate by killing their children, and women who kill unwanted children instead of putting them up for adoption or giving them to a family member, obviously aren't thinking rationally whatsoever. They could probably fit into the mentally ill mothers category also. Weisheit also wrote an article about children who are killed by their mothers, published in 1986. Of 460 fatal homicide offenders admitting to a straight prison for women in 1940 to 1983, 36 were institutionalized for killing their children. On the 6th of February 2019, the Australian Institute of Criminology released a report on filicide offenders. They found that the trends in more recent years indicate that male offenders for filicide are on the decrease, whereas female ones are on the increase. They identified 5 different motivations for filicide, the first being acutely psychotic filicide, wherein the parents have no comprehensible motive, they just are acting out of a mental illness. Child maltreatment filicide, which normally involves battered child syndrome, and it is where the child's death may be unintended. Altruistic filicide is where it's committed out of love, usually to help a child avoid perceived suffering that they are going through. Unwanted child filicide is where the child is no longer wanted and the act is taken to get rid of them. Spousal revenge filicide is where a parent kills their child in order to get revenge on their spouse. Other motivations which are covered in various different sources, which I will link down below, also cite murder-suicide as part of motivation for killing children. For example, in 2018, where Jennifer Hart drove her 6 children in a murder-suicide off of a cliff. Hapasala in 1999 looked at mothers who killed or attempted to kill their child between 1970 and 1996 in Finland. Data on the mother's life stresses, psychological problems, and childhood abuse were collected from a mental state examination, and they were divided into 15 neonaticides and 33 mothers who killed an older child. Childhood abuse was documented in 63%. A qualitative analysis identified neonaticides, joint homicide-suicide attempts, impulsive aggression, psychotic acts, postpartum depression, and abusive acts. Other sources, which I cannot currently find right now but will put in the description if I do, cite economic problems, financial problems, and a want to kill themselves but not leave their children behind as motivators for killing their children. However, I'm willing to bet that this is more common in third world countries rather than in the West, where financial stresses can mean life or death. I think that putting it down to mental illness is slightly a bit of a cop-out, because no rational person would think that killing their child is a better alternative than simply giving their child to somebody who would care for them. It doesn't collaborate with their maternal instinct. It doesn't make sense. When it comes to mental illness, we aren't just talking about depression and anxiety, which are common enough. We're talking about severe and untreated mental illness. This doesn't mean that everybody with a mental illness is going to kill somebody or do something horrific. It just means that this is part of why they did it. People like to refer to murderers and people who do horrific things as monsters. I do not like doing so, because I believe that if we refer to them as monsters or as evil things, we are putting it out of a scientific context and we are putting it into a mythological one. It's much easier to just call somebody a monster and not understand their actions than to recognize that they are also human and they have done terrible, terrible things. The fact is, though, that given the right genetics, the right circumstances, developmentally, whatever it may be, that could be us. And when it comes to psychology, it is important to recognize that It's why we do psychology and criminology. We have to understand that these are humans with human brains, and we have to understand what has gone wrong either in their development or genes or whatever it may be in order to prevent it from happening. There's so much research out there and so many cases that this video could go on forever, but from my findings I believe that the cited motivations tend to be the most common, and in cases, especially cases as global as these ones, it does tend to have an aspect of an unwanted child and therefore also mental illness. As I've said before, it is not a rational decision to kill your child just because you no longer want them around. I want to end this video by just giving a moment to Lexi, Scarlett, Alexander, Michael and Kaylee. I hope that their families eventually find peace, especially Kaylee's, who has not received justice. There are parents out there who do not deserve to be parents. There are parents who do awful and, quite frankly, evil things. I wanted to make this video to bring awareness to the fact that this is more common than people may like to admit, and that by recognizing that it happens, we can keep our eyes open when it comes to signs of a parent being neglectful, and therefore we can try and intervene before it becomes too late.